Good evening and welcome to the study session of the City Council of the City of Moreno Valley. The City Council receives a separate stipend for CSD meetings. I now call this meeting to order on October 14, 2025 at 6:01 p.m. Today's Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Councilmember Gonzalez. Please stand and join us in pledging our allegiance to the flag.
Place your right hand over your heart and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Thank you. Councilmember Bernard,
Here.
Councilmember Gonzalez,
Here.
Councilmember Delgado,
Here, ma'am. Thank you for that.
and Mayor Pro Tem Baca Santa Cruz and Mayor Cabrera are both absent.
Okay, thank you. Pursuant to the Brown Act, public comment shall be limited to those items only on the study session agenda. Each person shall be allowed a total of 3 minutes to comment on each item on the study session agenda. The city now offers language translation services through a free app called Worldly. The app automatically translates a variety of languages into English and vice versa. To use this service, please scan the QR code at the speaker's sign-up table. For the visually impaired, please use your earphones or earbuds to listen to the verbal translation. If you do not have any listening devices, please let the city clerk know, and they will let you borrow some.
La ciudad ahora ofrece servicios de traducción de idiomas a través de una aplicación gratuita llamada Wordly. Si gustan usar ese servicio, avísele a la secretaria y entregue una tarjeta para hablar. Para usar la traducción, escanee el código QR que está en la mesa junto a la puerta.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. In order to preserve the meeting decorum, council and staff will not respond during public comments. The first item the council will be discussing is F1, campaign activity restrictions, and I believe our city attorney will be presenting tonight. Good evening, Mr. Steve.
Over here. Okay, we did this 2 years ago, I guess, maybe 3 years ago. So you've heard this before, and you're going to hear it again. So we have our general elections coming up in November of 2026, so we thought we'd get a head start on this. And I'd just like to point out that this presentation is not only for those who are thinking about running for election, but it's also for the public and staff as well. So we're going to talk about restrictions related to campaign activities in relation to city property and within the context of City Hall. So the U.S. Supreme Court has chimed in on issues pertaining to campaign regulations, specifically campaign signs. But the court has taken the position that it's important that we strike a balance between the interests of personal rights of all the city officials, interests of the voters, and the interests of our taxpayers, just to ensure that we have a fair and impartial election process. So, this is actually really, really simple in that we cannot ever use public resources, which is anything that's paid for by the taxpayers, for campaign purposes. And that includes all of our copy machines. We don't have any more faxes, I don't think. Computers, printers. So if you're issued, for example, a phone that's paid for by the taxpayers, you can't even use that phone to engage in campaign activities. That's very important to remember. So you can't use any of these contraptions here to print pamphlets, flyers, or signs. Can't use city telephones or city-issued emails or city-issued any sort of devices for campaign purposes. You can't, and that includes, prohibition against making political cold calls for candidates, and this pertains to staff, which I know our staff does not do. But we have to be very careful about asking staff to do anything that appears to be campaign related. You can't use your office space here at City Hall to meet with supporters of anybody who supports your campaign. You can't meet at City Hall to organize events or to prepare any campaign material. So we're not just talking about the use of photocopying machines, we're talking about office space as well. You can't use office supplies, including staples, paper clips, anything. It doesn't matter what the value is, you cannot use it if it's paid for by the taxpayers. With respect to the city's website, city's social media, where we are the administrators, you're prohibited from using that, using our website or any of our social media sites that we administer for purposes related to your campaign. It includes any of these, requesting or soliciting campaign funds or referencing your campaign schedule. We are not going to keep on your calendar or put on your calendar anything that's related to your campaign activities. Can't use, again, this all pertains to staff time. So, as the campaign season takes, takes hold, it's very important to remember to distinguish between those activities that you are engaged or that you're participating in on behalf of the city from those activities that are related to your election or re-election to your current council seat. Employees are prohibited from wearing uniforms to engage in any campaign activity. And the folks that here wear uniforms include police, fire, code compliance, animal control, and I believe public works crews wear uniforms. Soliciting campaign contributions, and we're going to talk about the Levine Act later, but obviously you can't solicit campaign contributions from city employees. You cannot even obtain a list of city employees' names and addresses for campaign purposes. And of course, you can't direct any city employees to solicit campaign contributions on your behalf. Examples of soliciting campaign contributions include the mass mailing provisions of the Fair Political Practices Commission regulations. We cannot, there's this general rule that we can't send out 200 identical pieces? 200 identical pieces of mail
100.
that basically references anything related to your position on the city council. Those are absolutely prohibited. We can't engage in or set up any phone banks on behalf of any person running for office. You also can't use your position to influence anyone to vote in any way, whether or not it's for a state proposition, a local tax measure. You cannot encourage anyone to vote for any particular candidate, including yourself. You can't use your official position on the council to urge city employees to contribute to not only to yourself as a candidate, it also includes contributing to any other candidate. You can't make promises to any city employees that they would get a promotion or they'd be invited to a party or they're going to be hired or they're going to get a salary increase in exchange for their support. And when I talk about support, it's not limited to having them vote for you. It includes just campaigning for you, even, because some of them don't live in your district. Let's see, we went to that. We have a prohibition against sending out mass mailings within 60 days of an election that even, and this includes letters or any rosters that we send out or even photographs we send out of the council. Within 60 days of an election, even if we send out a photograph of the entire council and one of you happened to be running for office during that within 60 days of an election where you're going to appear on the ballot, your picture can't be in there. Your photograph can't be in there. So by chance we send out any photographs of the entire council or a roster that includes includes the council and you're one of the candidates, your face or your name won't appear on that roster or in that photograph. Within 60 days of an election, we also cannot have your signature appear anywhere on any official document of the city. We can't even make a reference to you in connection with you running for office. We can't send meeting announcements that include your name or your photograph within 60 days of an election. And we cannot distribute or print any business cards with your name or your photo within 60 days of an election. That's why within 60 days of an election, you see a lot of cities go quiet, where there's not a lot of information being provided either on the city's website or in cities' newsletters about the council in general, all because we may have one or two council members running for office. The city is also prohibited from, we already talked about business cards. Now let's talk about this issue of public forum analysis. Oftentimes we're asked, okay, so where can I distribute campaign materials? I know I can't distribute campaign materials at City Hall. I can't get assistance from city staff. Nothing involves tax dollars. But where can I? Well, I gotta tell you, this public forum analysis, it all depends on what the purpose of that public property is about. City Hall, inside City Hall, no. Outside City Hall, out here, not in the lobby, but out on the sidewalk, that's a public forum that's open to the public. So technically, you can engage in campaign activities out there as long as you're not impeding pedestrian traffic in and out of the council chambers. But the purpose of City Hall is to conduct city business. So there's an absolute prohibition against engaging in any campaign activities, even campaign conversations within City Hall. Purpose of the amphitheater. And so what we did a few years ago is that we had the council, we came up with a list of every single public space that is owned or operated or managed by the city. And we identified or described what the purpose of that public place was for. And the reason why we did that was to identify areas where there's an absolute prohibition on engaging in any campaign activities. And that includes our amphitheater. We described that the purpose for our amphitheater is for public entertainment. So because it's for public entertainment, no other type of speech is actually permitted to take place in there if it's not related to the purpose of the public entertainment of, just coming there and watching public entertainment. Our libraries, it's for library activities. Our Civic Center parking lot is for parking and movement of vehicles. So we were very specific on what the purpose of all these particular areas, public areas, are for. Then where, you might ask, where can I engage in campaign activities? Well, on our public sidewalks and our public walkways to our city facilities. So you can engage in campaign activities, meaning you can pass out flyers, you can talk to people about your campaign on our public sidewalks or our public walkways leading up to our city facilities, provided that you don't impede any pedestrian traffic. And or you don't create, you're not engaging in any activity that creates any traffic safety hazards or damages public property or results in litter. And that includes, like, if you're passing out flyers, we have to be careful about the litter issue. You may not affix campaign signs, however, to city buildings, city signs, city's fixtures, the equipment, city public restrooms. That's all pretty obvious. However, let's talk about our campaign signs laws. Now, when we were putting together the amendment to our sign ordinance to deal with campaign-related signs, we were required to look at it from these various perspectives that the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court, has mandated that we look at and review before we adopt these type of regulations. So what comes into play is always the First Amendment issue, because in our country, we give a lot of deference to First Amendment rights. So political campaigning speech is up there, and it's a lot of protections provided to it. So whenever we regulate campaign signs, we have to take into consideration the First Amendment rights of the person who's engaged in campaigning. Now, I should like to point out, though, that in regards to the analysis under our First Amendment, oftentimes we see the courts go one way or the other on the issue or on the scope of First Amendment regulations or laws that pertain to campaign signs. And so what may be okay one campaign season may change the next campaign season. And that's why we always see a lot of confusion over campaign regulations, or particularly campaign signs, from one campaign to another. Whatever regulations we do adopt, the courts require that the regulations be content neutral, just meaning that we can only regulate campaign signs based on anything other than what the campaign sign says, meaning that we can regulate campaign signs based on the size of the sign, how tall the sign is, whether the sign's going to be attached to a window or whether it's going to be attached to a post, or where it's going to be affixed to. So we can only regulate based on what we call time, place, and manner regulations. We can only impose time, place, and manner regulations. So we can, in regards to the place, it's going to depend on whether it's public property versus private property. The timing, there's been some restrictions that have been imposed on cities with respect to the timing of when campaign signs can be put up. And basically, well, actually, I have that, my next sign, next slide here. No, it's not. In any event, we'll get to that. So what cities have been doing since the most recent U.S. Supreme Court cases is that cities have been now regulating campaign signs as temporary signs. So the regulations that we apply to temporary signs are basically the kind of regulations that we can apply to campaign signs, because campaign signs are considered to be temporary signs. Do you need a permit to post or install or display a sign regarding a political campaign? No. That would be considered to be prior restraint. So in places where you can put up signs on public property, and we'll talk about where you can do that, you're not required to come in and apply for a permit to put up those signs. Do you have to register any information with the city before putting up campaign signs? The answer is no. But we strongly encourage all candidates to let the city know, who to contact in the event we're going to remove one of your signs, because you'll see later on in this presentation that we'll hang on to those signs that we remove that are in violation of our municipal code, and we'll save them and give you an opportunity as a candidate to send somebody over to pick up those signs. So again, although there's no registration requirement, we strongly encourage all candidates to let the city know who to call in the event we remove your signs. So a lot of cities used to have this provision that prohibited political campaign signs from being placed or installed or posted anywhere in the city more than 90 days outside of an election. That has been struck down by, I believe it was the Ninth Circuit, which is our circuit. And so that provision is no longer enforceable. We took action, the city council took action to remove that. Even though you'll see a temporary sign is described as those signs that are posted within 90 days of an election, that just simply is used to describe or define what a temporary sign is. But it's not to be interpreted to mean that you cannot place a political campaign sign beyond 90 days outside of an election. But we are still permitted as a city to require the removal of signs at 10 days after an election. So that means that because our next election is November 3rd, 2026, all political campaign signs have to be removed on public property no later than November 13th, 2026. May you post signs on private property? The answer is yes. You just need the permission of the person who has possession of the property, owns the property, or manages the property. Now, I believe that what we ended up doing is that we used to have a provision, and other cities used to have provisions in their municipal code that required like written permission from the property owner. I believe we recommended that that be removed because that's between the property owner and the candidate. And we don't want to get in the position of having to go out and regulate that by having somebody, the next door neighbor, calling and complaining. So again, if it's on private property, you just need the permission of the person who occupies, owns that property. Now, let's talk about public property. So again, you can't post signs in particular areas because of the public purpose related to that particular area that's owned by the public. You can't post them on buildings, on publicly owned buildings. And when I say publicly owned buildings, I'm talking about the city. I know the county has its own rules, but they can deal with that. So nothing on publicly owned structures, trees or shrubs, or portions of any streets, public streets or highways that are rights of ways that are used for traffic or parking purposes. And we added this not too long ago, that we do not permit the placement of political campaign or temporary signs, any kind of sign, in our mediums that are separating opposite vehicular traffic. So you see in some cities actually allow that. And then they have to go through this process as soon as there's an accident to get those signs removed by going to court. Here, we just have an absolute prohibition against placing any kind of sign on any of our medians that are dividing opposite traffic. Now, just because you can place signs in certain areas, and those areas, and I'll just tell you that the areas that you can place signs on that are public property are the areas like I guess we call them parkways. It's the areas that are adjacent to our sidewalks or adjacent to our roadways that are not used for pedestrians or for automobile traffic. So those could include some of our landscape areas. So signs are permitted in those areas. Now, we don't basically say you can do that, but under the case law out there, you can. So basically the rule is if you want to place a sign anywhere on public property, think to yourself, what is this public property used for? If pedestrians are using it to, pass through, the answer is no. But if it's an area where there's not going to be any threat to, public safety, then it's permissible. And again, you don't need permission to do that. You don't need a permit. You don't need to register. You can go ahead and place your signs in those areas. But sometimes, though, we'll see signs that are placed in those areas, and we get complaints from the public that it's impeding their sight of oncoming traffic. We get complaints like that. The candidate's office will be notified that those are going to have to be removed. So we deal with those on a case-by-case basis. So that means that there's plenty of places, or alternative places to place signs on public property. So we're not shutting down all public property to campaign signs. Now, again, when we talked about the kind of regulations we can place on signs, I mentioned that we can place these time, manner, and place regulations. And with that in mind, we came up with these regulations. So no single sign can exceed 32 square feet. No freestanding sign, this is signs that are on post, can be higher than 6 feet. No single lot in the city can have a total number of signs exceeding 80 square feet. No window signs can cover more than 25% of the clear sight of the window area. No banner sign can be placed lower than 8 feet above a walkway that's below it. No canopy sign can be placed lower than 8 feet above any walkway below it. Now, those are all sign regulations that has nothing to do with what's actually printed on the sign. And we had justified the imposition of all these regulations based on concerns with aesthetics and or public safety. You cannot have a sign that's artificially lit. And what happens if you violate our sign regulations? Well, you're going to get a notice of violation. A notice of violation is not, it's basically a warning. But our notice of violations come with potential fines. So you're provided with a grace period to remove your sign. And if you don't remove that sign within the time frame that we give you, then you'll get a fine. And so on private property, we'll have 5 days to remove a sign. If it's on public property and it presents an immediate danger to on public safety, we'll remove it immediately without any notice. Except you'll be told that, oh, we have one of your signs or we have 15 of your signs, and come and retrieve them. And we'll give you 30 days to come and retrieve your signs. So again, if you put up a sign in violation of our regulations, you'll get a notice of violation, and it potentially will come with a fine if you don't remove it in the time frame that we give you. Where do you retrieve your signs? Call our Community Enhancement Division, which is our code enforcement division, and here's the number. Okay, here's my favorite topic, the Levine Act. So the Levine Act was adopted a couple years ago. And since that time, it has been amended, and I've been told that we should anticipate more amendments, but currently these are the rules for the Levine Act. But the Levine Act really has to do with development projects. So I just keep that in mind. And in some cases with contracts. And so I'm gonna go through each of those and try to keep it as simple as possible. And I encourage candidates to contact the city clerk's office or even the city attorney's office. And we won't give you advice, but we'll suggest to you who to call so you can get advice on the Levine Act. And in some cases, we'll provide you with just general information about what the Levine Act is all about. But this really applies to city council members. Now, here's the general rule is that if we have an applicant that's here to apply for a development project and they made a contribution to any council member sitting up there of $500 or more within the prior 12 months, they have a duty to disclose that publicly. So the public all knows that this particular individual applicant provided a campaign contribution exceeding $500 within the prior 12 months before the public hearing. The Levine Act also prohibits our applicants from making a contribution exceeding $500 during the proceeding, during the public hearing or anywhere around that public hearing, and for 12 months following the final decision at that proceeding, which is generally going to be a public hearing. So this is a duty that's been imposed on applicants. Now, I should point out one of the amendments that occurred this year included increasing it from $250 to $500. The other amendment that took effect this year is that, and we'll talk about who participants are and agents, but participants and agents that are associated with the applicant are prohibited from making any contributions, any dollar amount within 12 months following the decision. And we'll talk about who these folks are. So for now, those are the applicants. The Levine Act also applies to contracts. So if the council is presented with a proposed contract, we look to the applicant, and those rules that apply to applicants for development projects also apply to applicants or anybody who's interested in entering into a contract with the city. The contracts that are exempt from the Levine Act include any contracts that are under $50,000, and we don't generally have a lot of those because we're dealing with public works projects. Any contract that's competitively bid, any labor or personal employment contracts, any contracts where there's no financial compensation, contracts between two government agencies, or even our annual periodic review of our development agreements. So these are the contracts that are exempt. What's that mean from a practical perspective? That just means that any of these applicants can provide, there's no restrictions on the campaign contributions they can make. So again, even though the Levine Act applies to contracts and the applicants or people who are interested in contracting with the city, there are exemptions, and these are the exemptions. Now let's talk about what a council member needs to do under the Levine Act. So if you received, as a council member, a campaign contribution of $500 or more in the prior 12 months before the proceeding or the public, basically the public hearing involving a particular project, you have to disclose that publicly. So, and that disclosure needs to take place, just like with the applicant, in the context of the public hearing, so the public is aware of that potential issue. How do you cure the situation? Let's say that 3 months before the public hearing, you received a $700 contribution from a developer applicant. If you return that contribution within 30 days after receiving that contribution, then it cleans the slate. So, sometimes I will ask a question, or I hear a question asked, did you receive a campaign contribution within, the last 12 months? And a council member will say yes. And then it's also important for me to ask, well, did you return it? The answer is generally no, but I'm seeing now that, by watching some council meetings, that, oh yeah, that council member actually returned it, anticipating that that particular contributor was going to bring a project forward. You also, okay, this is when we're going to talk about participants. Same rule applies when we're dealing with a participant, but what's a participant? A participant is a person or an entity who shows up at a public hearing and speaks for or against a particular project. And that's just one part of being a participant. The second part of it is if that person or entity has a financial interest in that project, good or bad, add those two together, that person's a participant. So if we have citizen A show up at a council meeting during a public hearing in support of a particular project, and that particular individual, let's say that particular individual owns some property that will be developed as part of that project, or is located across the street from that particular project, and the value of that individual's property is going to go up, then there's a financial interest involved. So with that financial interest and the fact that this person shows up in support of the project makes that person a participant. And once that person's deemed to be a participant, within 12 months after that public hearing, that participant cannot make any contributions to any of the council members. That was one of the 2025 amendments. So there's an absolute prohibition against a participant making a contribution. And so to make this simple, the same rule applies to agents now. So an agent can be somebody who's a lobbyist for the particular applicant. It could just be, their general manager, anybody who's hired or retained by the applicant to represent the applicant's interests. So if it's an agent or a participant, they cannot make any contributions within 12 months following a final decision on a project. And again, the only way you can cure this situation is by returning the contribution within 30 days after receiving the contribution. And this may come up sometimes because sometimes, it's not obvious that a person is an agent or a participant because a lot of the participants don't even know they're participants. But in the event they discover later that they're a participant and they gave a contribution, and the council candidate finds out, then they'll be advised the only way you can cure that is to return it within 30 days after receiving that contribution. So as far as council members, you can't solicit from the applicant within 12 months, $500 or more. And again, you can cure it in the event that happens by returning it within 30 days. Oh, here's the definition of participant. So we talked about it's not the applicant, it's a person who supports or opposes a project and has a financial interest in the decision. Oh, and here's my definitions of what a financial interest is. So let's say if a business owner comes up and opposes or supports a project, and they have either indirect investment worth or direct investment of $2,000 or more in that particular project, then they're considered to be a participant if they show up and testify at the hearing. If they have any real property that it's $2,000 or more, that's going to be impacted by the particular project, and they show up, then they're considered to be a participant. If the applicant for the development project is a source of income for this particular individual, and within the last 12 months, and they show up to testify at the public hearing, they're considered to be a participant. If they receive a gift from that applicant, in the prior 12 months at $250 or more, then that meets the definition of a financial interest. They show up at a hearing, testify one way or the other, they're considered to be a participant. So again, it's important to remember that once they're deemed to be a participant, they can't make a campaign contribution within 12 months after the public hearing. So here's my conclusion, and this is actually my quote. It's all about protecting the taxpayer's investment in public property, because we talked about all the regulations about where you can put up, place signs, and it's to protect, public resources. It's also respecting the rights of city staff and protecting the integrity of the local elections, which builds trust and confidence in local government, and that's all about your constituents and the public we serve. So there you go. That's all in a nutshell. A lot of this is very intuitive. We don't run into a lot of these issues because it's all very intuitive. Again, it's all about taxpayers' dollars. Any questions?
Thank you, Steve. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak at this time?
Yes, there are, Councilmember Delgado. The first three speakers are Seth Cox, followed by Lindsay Robinson, followed by Christopher Baca.
Good evening, short council staff. Thank you attorney for giving that information. It would have been nice if it would have been public information so we could have pre-read it before we got here, but that's just my preference. And you were going down the right path, but stopped a little short. My issue or subject is the uniforms. We know our police force, everybody else wears uniforms. I'm going to go further down the line. If you are a city council member or you are on a commission and you are wearing our shirts that are labeled City of Moreno Valley Commission, and you are at a public event where you are representing the city, where you be a council member or commission, and our photographers are making pictures with city money being paid, you cannot use those pictures or that event to campaign. So,
That's correct.
so even though it's not a, quote, uniform, it's a quasi-uniform. It gives the impression that the city is endorsing your campaign. I know we have a very prominent sheriff that does it every day almost, but he's not being held accountable for it. So we need to make sure that that doesn't happen within the city and we get the perception that we're supporting their candidacy. We may be.
Thank you for bringing up that issue, because we just recently issued shirts. So I forgot.
Correct. And so it has happened already, but I think it should be on the books. It shouldn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The next two speakers are Christopher Baca, followed by Roy Blackard.
So you did touch on participants, and I would really like to see more regulation on participants and lobbyists when it comes to developers and the public forum and the public testimonies when their projects come up, particularly this past, I believe it was in December or November, right after the election, or was it right before the election, when they, when the hearing was for that Aquabala Town Center, and you had lots of participants and lots of lobbyists, and they were not disclosed. They were presented as people from the community, but they were paid lobbyists. I don't want to speak about religion or pastors or anything, but the pastors that come up here to speak on the project, they get donations. Of course, they don't need to disclose them because they're 501Cs and it's a religious entity, but they're getting money to come up here and speak, you know, whatever their influence to speak about with money. And lots of community members that are also told that the interest is real estate and so forth. Those are lobbyists. There's no regulation and there's no enforcement on that. So where do we go from that? I mean, these, you know, you got some of these big, you know, pony, what is it called? Dog and pony shows with the developers, and they spend a lot of money getting people to come up here and testify, and a lot of that stuff is just plain lies and nonsense at the eventually at the taxpayers' expense. So lobbyists, participants, and a lot of dark money, and the city's not regulating it. But you know, we got a good show here, but it's all not regulated. Thank you.
The next
Thank you, Chris.
speaker is Roy Blackard.
Most of this nonsense you just heard about is about taking away our freedom. And I say that because today would have been the 32nd birthday of Charlie Kirk, who was wearing a freedom shirt when he was politically assassinated. But all this stuff of going and doing this and that, and it's one main reason why I very rarely, if not ever, make political contributions, because you don't have any idea what stupid law that you're coming across that you may be violating. This is a complicated web that we have weaving for ourselves, and it makes people not want to participate, because if you did make a political contribution, now do you do this? And if you made $1 over, you could be in big, humongous trouble. We need to think about what we're doing. And then, of course, we have paid lobbyists up in Sacramento. Why aren't we telling them, get rid of this crap? All you should do is have disclosure. I don't care if I give Shaylinda $1 million, if that's up there and it's disclosed, then it's up to us to decide whether we're going to vote or support a project or not. Let's get rid of the nonsense. We waste so much time of this with all these ridiculous mandates and this, and all it's doing is taking away your freedom. This is why we must resist any part of this coming up. And I will say we are going backwards, and Seth made a good point. 10 years ago, I stood up on the second story with Tom DeSantis, who was the assistant city manager, and Mayor Tom Owings. And when it was on these very study sessions in your phony public safety meetings and stuff, I said, why can't we have the reports printed when the agenda's out so we could read them and know what's going on? Because I will say, you should send this over to the crime syndicate and others so they have the idea when we're doing on the sidewalks and we're doing that's okay, and we're not having and I mean, it's kind of a funny, but we do have these disputes going on all the time of this stuff of what you can do and can't do. And it creates a lot of angst and things. And then you've got the internet keyboard warriors that think they know everything or posting everything. If it's out there in public, we can see it, it's accessible, it should eliminate a lot of BS.
Thank you, Mr. Roy.
For the record, I would like to notate that I have never received $1 million from Mr. Bleckert. I just want to put that out there because he said it very quickly. Thank you.
Duly noted.
Councilmember Gonzalez Delgado. That concludes public comment for this item.
Well, thank you, ma'am. We'll move on to council questions or discussion items for this.
Just really quick, can you please define a lobbyist one more time for the public?
First of all, we require lobbyists to register with the city.
And those lobbyists are actually, for transparency purposes, on the website under the city clerk's area.
I can tell you it doesn't include legal counsel for the developers.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions. Steve, on the, for those folks that are going for higher elections versus the city one election in the general, there's primaries. Do all of the sign rules and the coffee with Ed 60 days prior, I can't post or I can't send something out 60 days prior to the primary as well?
General election.
Just the general?
Correct.
Okay.
Just general.
So these rules do not apply the dates to primaries?
Correct.
Okay, thanks. That's all I have. Anybody else? Okay, very good. Well, thank you guys very much. Thanks, Steve, for that awesome presentation. The second item the council will be discussing tonight is F2, Rancho Balago Estates annexation, and I believe the city manager will take care of it. Thank you, Mr. Mohan.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Delgado, other council members. This particular item was put together in concert with the city clerk, city attorney, and myself to ensure that residents and so forth had a timeline related to this particular development and this particular annexation due to just the sheer number of Public Records Act requests that we're receiving related to this particular item. So when this all started, it started from an inquiry that our transportation division received along about the end of April related to a project that the county was putting forth. And so the county sent over some scoping information related to possible traffic impacts of city intersections due to the development out on the east side of our city. Unfortunately, I was out of the country on bereavement leave, and when I got back, the assistant city manager over development notified me and updated me of said request along about May 5th. So in talking with the development team and talking with internally with my team, we wanted to inform council. And so on May 20th, we went into closed session to update council related to the potential impacts of this particular development, which was called Rancho Balago Estates. And the potential, it was a potential litigation matter due to the fact that the county was taking the lead on a particular project that had some serious negative impacts and potential service costs that the city would actually have to service the area because it was in our sphere of influence. So council that night directed the city manager and city attorney to reach out to the county regarding the project. And they authorized myself and the city attorney to negotiate a possible solution to see how we potentially mitigate those particular impacts. Sorry, that was probably my cell phone that was next to the speaker. Yes, sorry about that. At least it was on silent this time. Then on, based on that direction that I stated, at the end of May, city attorney had reached out to the developer's legal counsel to discuss the impacts of the project and the developer and how to offset and mitigate the potential impacts of that particular project. In June, early June, they came back and proposed a pre-annexation development memorandum of understanding to authorize the city to be the lead agency for the project instead of the county. And that would allow us to determine the proper mitigation measures needed to protect the city and eliminate the possibilities of having to initiate the litigation for this particular project. But more importantly, it protected the city's interest. This particular MOU, this pre-annexation MOU, was fully executed on June 27th, 2025 with my signature, the developer's signature, as well as the city attorney's, based on the prior approval that we received in closed session. Then on July 22nd, the planning division received the developer application for the particular project. On the 28th of July, the city issued a notice of preparation to provide all the responsible agencies, trust agencies, and other interested parties for information describing the proposed development and the potential environmental impacts. And written responses based on that NOP were to be received in due August 27th. August 4th, based on the MOU being the pre-annexation MOU being fully executed, I sent a letter to the county regarding the lead agency for said development. And then August 12th, I received a response letter from Riverside County stating that we would be the lead agency. Then on August 19th, the city received notification from the developer that they had officially requested a withdrawal of the pending applications that were had previously been submitted to the application, or to the, sorry, their previous applications that had been submitted to the county. And then on August 20th, we held a scoping meeting at 6 p.m. in the City Hall Council Chambers. Since then, we've had a significant number of PRAs that have been submitted. And so the next several slides are literally just the PRAs that were received, who are they received by, the receive date, the description of the request, and the actual request that sought certain information. And so I'm not going to spend much time in these because this is all public record as well. So, but just keep in mind that we have received a significant amount of PRAs, which started in August. And they continued through a multitude of months, August, September, October as well. All of these have been responded to. There's a total of 11 in total, even the one that was received this afternoon. All have been responded to except for the ones that were received in October. And as you can see, that the way the naming convention occurs from our public records names is 2025, then the month 10, and then the actual sequence. So the last three here have not been responded to. But we felt that between the city clerk, city attorney, and myself, we felt that it'd be prudent to go ahead and make this a public document. So now that this has been part of the official record, this document will be provided to the city clerk and will be placed on our website, as well as it will be discoverable, obviously in PDF form. And then therefore it will be public record as to the timeline. But this particular timeline does include the council direction in closed session for city attorney and city manager to go ahead and seek mitigation of those significant burdens from this particular project, and the fact that the developer offered us a pre-annexation MOU. We felt that that would be the best approach, as now not only do we get to control the development and the mitigation of those particular costs. With that, this concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments on this item?
Yes, there are. The first two speakers are Lindsay Robinson, followed by Christopher Baca.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening, council and staff. He said there was an NOP sent out about Rancho Balago Estates. I did not receive one, even though I'm on the email list, so I'd like to know when it went out and how many people received it. I hope you're aware of the settlement agreement made with Highland Fairview regarding the WLC. He is supposed to pay $3 million to improve Gilman Springs Road, and also $3 million to the Transportation Commission regarding Highway 60, unless behind closed doors you gave him back that money and he doesn't have to do it. That becomes due when his first warehouse is operational. So, has that been rescinded? If not, then you need to not vote for this. This needs to be ended now because we're just paying for more infrastructure for Edo Benzivi. We paid for Nason to be punched through. We paid for the Theodore interchange, all his signs, all his promotions, etc. We've given him enough money. Alessandro is going to be closed at Merwin according to the plan, yet the city paved it for him. So let's stop. Let's wait till he gets to pay his $3 million for the highway and for Gilman Springs Road before we accept liability and pay for it. I think it was premature to enter into a memorandum of operation or whatever, MOU, with him because I believe it had a 65-day comment notice to rescind it. So if I recall correctly, none of us got to look at it to see what we're giving away. So please do not let this move forward until he's paid his fair share. We need to stop supporting him. Also, for 10 years, we've tried to get 6 districts in a study session. Gaiba got it in one in January. Gutierrez canceled it, canceled further study sessions. We've had many council members say in their campaigns that we'd get 6 districts. It's time to work for the residents and not for Edo Benzivi.
I'm sorry, council member, this doesn't pertain to this particular item.
Next speaker, ma'am.
The next speaker is Christopher Baca.
Good evening. Again, my comments are my own and don't reflect anybody's views other than myself. Why did the city attorney and the city manager, if there was a potential for litigation, just let it happen instead of pursuing the city council to create this MOU? As far as any action needs to be reported, so this MOU or the whole process to me, I believe is illegal and is a violation of a Brown Act because you are spending public funds that must be disclosed. MOU is public funds. What does that MOU grant the developer? Vast amounts, millions of dollars worth of infrastructure. Okay, so yes, all of the timeline is accurate. I first became aware of this by Lindsay that informed me there was going to be a scoping meeting for more of Benzivi's BS on a sideline. You know, I'm not against any of his developments, but they're pipe dreams. They're nonsense. It's not real. When are you going to wake up? It's not real. He's bamboozling you. He sold us a bridge, for God's sake. You want to buy city wants to buy the London Bridge? I'll sell it to you, as well as a Brooklyn Bridge. Come on now. He hasn't done anything. Aquabella 1, Aquabella 2, WLC, the Ironwood Corridor, and now this? Come on now. It's nonsense. But anyhow, I was there, at the scoping meeting. Then I spoke to Sean, and he informed me more or less that it's a done deal, and the city is going to provide the infrastructure. In my opinion, it's an infrastructure to go from Alessandro to there, to the Gilman Springs, so he can tap into it and get out of his responsibilities for spending, having to pay all that stuff that Lindsay mentioned. It's nonsense. And it's a gift of public funds in the amounts to millions of dollars. So this staff is either incompetent, incompetent, unable to conduct their business legally. This is a gift of public funds. It must be disclosed. You cannot have this in a closed session. If it was in a closed session and they were giving directive, it must be disclosed because it involves money. So I don't know where this is going to lead to, but it's going to end up in more shameful activities by the city of Moreno Valley.
Thank you, sir.
Speaker is Roy Blackard.
I guess we didn't have enough fun a decade ago. We got to start bringing up the same BS that we went through, and the same allegations are going to come up through, and the same old, same old. I have even less faith than I did before I walked up here that I ever will see this city become anything more than a laughing stock of what it is. When can we move on from this? I mean, I kind of find it interesting we're getting a study session about this when there's probably much more pertinent stuff we could be dealing with, but we are dealing with it, and we're watching this. When is the council, when is the city staff, in my opinion, going to wake up and demand that we start moving things forward where we can get things going in a positive direction instead of fighting the same battles? Like I said, I've been here for parts of 7 decades. And I've watched this stuff go back and forth. And this is why we're in the situation in the city we are in. What day do we learn? What day do we start using the experience and talent that's in this city? As Donovan brought up at the last council meeting. We don't. So maybe as we look, and maybe this is a good indication, or maybe this is one of those teachable moments, although I have my very strong doubts, that everybody will lay all this BS that's been going aside. And let's just sit down and talk about it and put together the best ideas we got to make things move forward. You're not going to like everything. You're not going to agree 100% of everything that goes on, but let's get it, like with this, let's get a deal on the table that's going to work for everybody. Or we can continue the Hatfields and McCoys and the dissension and the BS. That's a choice that's in front of every member of 200,000 in this community. I hope starting October 14th, 2025, that will be drilled or sink into some of the hard skulls that keep beating this stuff every day.
Thank you, Roy. Next speaker, ma'am.
Bob Palomares.
Good evening. Sometimes I listen, all the time I listen to these people that come in here and speak, and with the exception of Roy, they seem to know more than the city staff. And, to me, they're accusation, rumors, and sometimes it's misleading. Someone mentioned that the city had to pay for the punch through on Nason. That's true, they paid, but the land was donated by Edo. Forgot that. But, if you're going to come up here, if you got it on paper, bring the facts. Because I don't think intentionally, or who knows, I listen to Roy quite a bit, and he's pretty good, but I think our staff leads us in the right direction. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
That concludes all of public comments for this item.
Thank you, ma'am. Are there any comments or questions from the dais?
There were some comments that were made by the public. Would staff like to clarify some of the statements that were made regarding infrastructure or the millions of dollars that have been given away in scoping meetings?
Yes, Councilmember, thank you. Regarding the presentation and the timeline and the MOU literally is a document that just states that the city is working with the developer to potentially accept the development into our particular jurisdiction. The developer will still have to go through LAFCO proceedings. There'll be a lot of jurisdictions that are going to have to meet, negotiate the various property tax and who gets what based on where that property tax lies now, which is with the county. And then the development will still have to go through all of our normal development standards predicated on what those standards are at this particular point in time. This document doesn't give away any authority from the council to staff related to future dollars, related to dollars to put in infrastructure. There is nothing in that document that states that, in essence, that the city is on the hook for any of the infrastructure. All it does is it basically outlines how do we take the development and move it from the county to the city as a lead agency, and potentially do a annexation based on the developer's application with LAFCO. At the same time, the development is going through our development standards and our normal development processes. Thank you.
So basically, we requested permission from the county to take lead on this. They gave us permission to take lead on this. Now we're taking lead on it, but there's still many more, I would say, obstacles, but processes to go.
Yes, and LAFCO proceedings could take anywhere between a year to 2 years. I mean, it's not a quick process. The development itself going through development standards, obviously the city does work fairly quickly with the developers, but it still has to go through all of the various insurances to ensure that it meets all of our standards.
Thank you.
The bottom line is that with the MOU, we took control over the destiny of this project versus another jurisdiction. If the county retains jurisdiction over the future of this project, we have no control over it.
And we have no say.
No say,
And
we have control.
And in saying that, this particular location is in our sphere of influence. So if it was to move forward with the county and all of the various property tax stay with them, we would be servicing that location at the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars annually, if not millions annually, because our fire and law enforcement would have to be going to every single one of the calls out there. Therefore, to mitigate that, there's a lot of times when jurisdictions do take a look at projects that are in the sphere of influence, and they go ahead and look at annexing that so they can share in the income or revenue of property tax.
Thank you, Brian. Councilmember Gonzalez?
Brian, and it, right, if and when this property is annexed and for the public, if the developer does request public monies for infrastructure, how does that play out in a very summarized fashion? What does that entail for their purposes, for their public?
Well, typically what will happen is if they're needing funds to do their project, they go out and get the funding. The city does work with developers on various ways to find funding to fund their fees, whether it be development impact fees and or other fees as liabilities to the city. So there's CFDs, various districts, there's skip financing, there's all kinds of various bonding measures to assist in ensuring that the city is made whole from our fees. We have not. The city hasn't worked with developers to put in any of their infrastructure since I've been here in 2017. So the other thing is, there's various things that the developer does have the ability to do based on current law, very similar to how redevelopment agencies operated back prior to the dissolution in 2012. But those particular type of districts, the taxing agencies are potentially giving up something, typically property tax, to build infrastructure. And at this particular point in time, council has not directed me to do any type of those type of districts with this particular developer or any other developer. So if there is any conversation of that being done by any developers, then most likely they are seeking the county's authorization to potentially give up the county's property tax increment and not the city's.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you guys for questions. If there are no more questions, we're going to move on to F3. Madam Clerk, who will be providing the presentation for the third item, which is F3, Community Fire Hazard Reduction?
It'll be Chief Jesse Park.
Chief Jesse Park. Welcome, Chief.
And up here now. Okay, so the purpose of this is really just to provide information to the council, familiarize the council with the various agencies and organizations and the terminology that's used in community risk reduction, because a lot of the terminology is similar and there's a lot of organizations out there. And so when I go through this, I'll try to be clear about what the fire departments endorse and what are just sort of terms or groups that are within this sphere of community risk reduction. I want to update you on what we're already doing here in the city, and then just ensure that, the council and the mayor and the direction of the city is met when we're talking about community risk reduction. So community risk reduction is also known as wildfire preparedness, but the reason that we use community risk is because it's more of an all hazard. You've seen that after these big wildfires come through, then there's weather, we have debris flows and floods and things like that. So we want to be prepared for everything. So it's more of an all hazard, and that's why it's CRR. So this is what we're going to be talking about. And we kind of look at this as sort of a flow chart, right? That we talk about homeowner responsibility, then groups, community-led groups, what the city can do, what the county is doing, and then what the state and the feds are doing. So the first one I'd like you to be aware of is AB 3074. That's also commonly known as the Zone Zero Law. It was put in place in 2021, but it's been a little bit controversial. And that's because it expands the zone around this zero zone around your house as that first 5 feet. And what they're saying when they put together this law was that that's the most combustible zone, so let's remove everything from there. And that's why it's controversial, because not everybody wants pea gravel for the first 5 feet around their house, and neither do the developers, right? The developers are trying to do landscape. It also has to do with home hardening, and it applies to the very high fire severity zones. It also does public education and compliance. So there's a lot of discussion on this. It's going to continue to move through the process, and I wanted you to be aware of it, that it's out there and it's something that is in our sphere. The next is the California Building Code. So the California Building Code, Title 24, is divided into 12 parts. I bring this up because Part 7 is the new Wildland Urban Interface Code that's come out. It's had a lot of impact since the major fires that we've had over the last couple of years that have been so catastrophic. And the California Building Code, it's on a triennial cycle. So that's coming up for its first and second reading in our next staff report, right, our next meeting. What happens is the California Building Code, they put out the code, then it goes into Riverside County Ordinance 787. That's the county version of it, right? And then the city adopts the similar with 2 readings, and then it becomes effective on 1/1/26. And so that new Wildland Urban Interface Code goes hand in hand with Zone Zero, which also goes hand in hand with the fire severity zone map. So it all kind of works together. So those are all things that are laws. Those are things that the fire department endorses. This is something that we don't specifically endorse, but the reason I bring it up is because people want to know what they can do to ensure that they have insurance or that they can reduce their insurance. And there is unfortunately no one single thing. The insurance companies will not specifically say, if you do this, we will give you insurance. But there are some things that you can do. So if you apply to those Zone Zero standards and you look at home hardening and defensible space, that's great. But there is also this Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, IBHS. They are a science-based group that the insurance companies pay into. They have a facility in North Carolina where they burn down buildings and they hit them with wind, and they do all this testing on there. And they look at, they have this thing called the Fortified Wildfire Program, which focuses on there. And if you reach out to IBHS, you become a member online, you can get one of their wildfire inspections, and then that means that your house has been certified. Because one of the things that the insurance company says is, well, we see that you trimmed the vegetation around your house, but how do we know you're going to keep it trimmed, right? So it's kind of like when the builder, the builder will build the home to the new code, right? And they'll say, you meet all the criteria. But then the insurance company will say, well, but we don't know if you took off those screens, right? We told you had to have these metal screens on there for embers, but we don't know if you took them off. So we're not going to insure you, right? So this is one of those things. So this isn't specifically endorsed by us, but it's one of those things that I think is important for, the citizens to know about. It's out there, and it's another thing that can help you maintain your insurance. NFPA Firewise, National Fire Protection Association. I wanted to bring up Firewise because Firewise is a neighborhood level wildfire preparedness for 8 homes or more. So if 8 homes or more band together, so think of your HOAs are already 8 homes or more usually, but there can also be 8 homes or more in a community group. They can go out and apply for NFPA Firewise recognition. They do this by going through the process. They come up with their own community plan. They do volunteer time. They have a customized action plan that looks at vegetation management and home hardening within those 8 or more homes. And so then they have Firewise come out and certify them, and that also can improve their ability to maintain insurance or get grant funding, right? It's another type of certification process. Okay, so that's FireWise. Next is what's called a Fire Safe Council. You've probably heard of these before. They're throughout California, they're everywhere. They're local wildfire mitigation leadership. Fire Safe Councils empower communities to plan and implement wildfire prevention projects, such as fuel reduction, defensible space education, and evacuation planning. Here in the county, we have the southwestern one down there in the sort of the Duluth area, right? And then we have the Mountain Safe Council that's up there in Pine Cove. They have access to funding and grants because they're a network. They can be paid or they can be all volunteer. They can be a nonprofit organization or they can be a function. There is no true rule on exactly how it has to work, but the state has a state FireWise or Fire Safe Council coordination that they can assist with. And so, you know, it promotes these better relationships with the different stakeholders that are out there and the homeowners and the communities. And so a Fire Safe Council may assist homeowners with doing some of those home hardening or assist property owners with getting vegetation removed because they have the money and the ability. Okay, the California Board of Forestry has something called the Fire Risk Reduction Community List. What it is being on the list means a city or community is officially recognized by CAL FIRE and the Board of Forestry for taking proactive steps to reduce wildfire risk. This is very similar to a FireWise community, but it's at the city level, okay? It's a jurisdiction. So whereas FireWise would say, you've done this and you've made your community stronger, and the IBHS may come in and say, you made your home stronger. This is the Board of Forestry saying the city has made an effort to make things stronger. It gives us improved access to grants, technical assistance, and fuel reduction programs. And again, it helps support the insurance agencies that we're doing all that we can within the city. So, what have we done so far? You may remember that the updated fire hazard severity zone maps were required to be adopted by every jurisdiction, and we did this, right? The council did this early in the year. Just a reminder that they're called fire hazard severity zone maps because they're looking at the hazard. The difference is the hazard is that your house is near brush, and there could be an ember cast from a fire, and you're in the way. The risk is whether your house is built of straw or brick, right? That's the risk. So it's not a risk map, it's a hazard map. And so that the risk is where we talk about the zone 0 and the home hardening and things like that. This is the hazard map, okay? Another thing that we've completed that, that's good. Another thing that we've completed is the AB 2140. We just had that in one of the last council meetings. That's enhanced disaster recovery and funding, and it allows us to maximize our recovery if we are involved in a disaster, not just wildfire. Then there's the Fire Risk Reduction Community List. We've applied for that. Okay, that opened up in July. It's an annual thing, and we should know soon. We worked with CAL FIRE, we worked with the Board of Forestry, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be. We have a strong application. Okay, so then the federal government has the Community Wildfire Defense Grant, and that helps, the intent of that grant is to help communities, counties, cities, homeowner groups to create a community wildfire protection plan, which we'll go into next. We did not receive that grant, unfortunately. We were really hoping that we would. Looks like we were maybe too small of a jurisdiction. We looked at the recipients. It was all places like Solano County and, you know, large, very large areas. But there's plenty of grants out there. You know, we'll keep trying. That's the kind of thing you got to do, right? You don't always receive the grant. The Community Wildfire Protection Plan, or CWPP, it provides, it's very similar now to the FireWise, right? That's why we're kind of going in order from homeowner to community and then to the city. This CWPP is this tailored collaborative strategy, and it's one of the prerequisites for receiving federal and state wildfire mitigation grants. And so what we're doing is we're in the RFQ process. We're looking for qualifications on that. We're looking for how we can fund that. We're looking for the time that it would take to do that. It's a long process. It goes out, it looks at all the different areas, all the different property owners. It does a lot of community engagement. And so it's a long process, maybe 16, 18 to 24 months is the type of thing that you would do. And then you would have this plan, and then that plan gives you, then you have an approved plan, kind of like the LHMP is approved, right? It's been approved by OES and by FEMA. This CWPP would be approved, and then that provides us access to more grants, right, and more assistance. So, not to toot our own horn, but only Moreno Valley, Rancho Mirage, Corona, and Menifee are AB 2140 compliant. The only city in Riverside County right now to be on that fire risk reduction community list is Murrieta. So, you know, we are on the forefront of trying to get these things done. It's not like we're behind and these things, everybody else is doing them and we haven't. We're actually trying to lead the pack on these things. What is Riverside County doing? They're doing very similar. They're applying for grants, and then they provide these to the different fire safe councils. So they're running fuel breaks and down there in the southwest area and along Elsinore. They're doing vegetation management plans. They call it a management plan because we can't always burn, right? We can't always reduce fuel by burning. Sometimes it has to be handwork with chainsaws because it's a sensitive area. Sometimes it's done with masticators, right? They just come in and they just grind everything up. And sometimes we do it with extending roads. And sometimes we do it with what's called a broadcast burn. Broadcast burn was when we burn and it just burns the area. And other burning is when we brush it and stack it and we burn it as piles. So there's all sorts of different methods. The important thing to remember about a vegetation management plan or treatment plan is it grows back, right? So it has to be an ongoing continuous thing. It's not like it stops. You don't just do it. It's not a one and done. Riverside County Fire is creating a countywide CWPP, and we'll be part of that. So, you know, it's not like the end of the world that we didn't get this grant, we don't have our CWPP. Because we're part of County Fire, we do get to enjoy the benefits of that regional fire protection, and this will be one of the things. Also, the county seeking that fire risk reduction list. The county helps us adopt and enforce new regulations, and then they're performing strategic planning by a third party to look at the assessment of what the future fire department will look like. CAL FIRE also does similar at the state level. They help us with the defensible space inspections. That's Public Resource Code 4291. And then the defensible space inspections for when you're going to sell your house or you're buying a house. You have to have an AB 38 inspection if you're in those zones. So that's part of why that red, orange, and yellow zone are important, is because if you're going to buy or sell a house, or if you're going to do a major addition, you're going to need to get an AB 38 inspection. Our inspectors do that here in the city, right, for us. Edgar Gonzalez's team. And then in the state responsibility, CAL FIRE does that. CAL FIRE also does the fuel reduction projects. They provide grant funding and technical assistance. They help the community planning support for those CWPPs, and they do our subdivision reviews. And then they do a lot of public education and outreach, right? At the federal level, even though it's shut down, it's not shut down forever. We know that. They provide a lot of grant funding. It's still going on. Today I was in a federal FEMA class, and they do a lot of technical assistance. They do the adoption enforcement, and they also do a lot of public education, right, on that. Okay. Other groups that provide information and assistance, but these aren't specifically endorsed by the fire department. They're just groups out there. They're similar to fire safe councils, but they're not fire safe councils because they don't represent just one community. My Safe Riverside is a group that is designed for networking and assistance. If homeowners wanted assistance in home hardening, they can go to My Safe Riverside. They can go to the Safe Community Project. They can go to the Inland Empire Fire Safe Alliance. These are all nonprofits that have some staff. Usually they get grant funding to pay the staff, and they help to coordinate and dole out money and assistance, and some of it's for free and some of it, is not. So I wanted to bring them up because there are additional good resources that are out there. So there's really kind of a unity in recommendations from the federal, state, and local level on those best practices. I put this as a wheel because there's not really any one starting point. It all kind of goes around in a circle. You kind of have to keep doing these things over and over, right? You do vegetation treatment plans, you promote citizen preparedness, there's home hardening defensible space, fire safe councils, CWPPs, Firewise communities. They're all kind of the same type of thing that everybody recommends. And so those are the things that we're working for and looking at. Just one other thing that I think is important to bring up, especially when we're talking about these codes and CWPPs and all this stuff, is the fire department helps people develop safely, right? We provide them the codes, we'll do inspections and permits and recommendations, but we don't tell people where they can and can't build. We just tell you that you can build, if you're gonna build there, that's in the red zone, and these are the things that you're gonna need to do to be safe, right? We don't say, you can never build there because that's going to burn down. We just tell them these are the codes, these are the building codes, this is what would make it fire safe, along with our building department. And that kind of goes along with all this, right? Promote that citizen preparedness, resident home hardening, that zone 0 areas, and how we're going to do this. So that's the ongoing process, and that is the end of report, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Chief. That was awesome. Madam Clerk, are there any public comments for this item?
We do. The first speaker is Seth Cox.
Thanks, Chief.
I might recommend you get more comfortable chairs out there. Maybe I'm just getting old, I don't know. A rolling recliner. Thank you, Chief. Very good information. Again, I'll go to the one-sided, okay? I read it as community fire hazard, not community wildfire hazard. My concern is the city doesn't need another Stater Brothers issue, okay? If you remember, year before last, I was up here at every meeting talking about the Stater Brothers, okay? It still hasn't been totally redeveloped and put back to good use. What are we doing about the businesses that are not doing the right things also? All right. Most of you know, I work with a couple of charities in town. We have a bus that goes around every few weeks and feeds the homeless or the underserved. I happen to be driving the bus this weekend and filling in for the normal driver. 5 hours driving around the city, making about 23 miles of circles around town, going in alleyways and back entrances to stores where the, our underserved, our homeless people hang out. We have a waste management problem. I saw so many dumpsters full, overflowing, on the ground. Took some pictures. If we're talking about fire hazards, today is the first time I had to wear a jacket this year. So if I'm getting cool, don't you think the people out there on the streets are getting colder? They're going to be looking for ways to stay warm. Guess what? It's coming. So what are we doing? Do we have some plans in place, some extra inspections of abandoned buildings, and so we don't have Stater Brothers? Our absentee owners that don't seem to comply very much and they can just delay it and delay it and delay it because they can get 3 or 4 warnings and not have to address anything until winter's over, when we've already had the fires. So think about that. Again, I have the utmost respect for the fire department. They're the first ones that run toward the fire, okay? So I'm never going to complain about the fire department. But we as citizens need to be looking out for the citizens, homeowners, and businesses. Because when one of the big shopping centers, knock on wood, if it doesn't go to fire, there'll be many businesses that will be impacted. They could burn down too because of something that happened on the far end of the facility. They had no control over, but they were caught up in it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
That concludes public comments on this item.
Thank you, ma'am. Any comments or questions from the dais? All right, well, Chief, thank you guys. Thank you for that presentation. I think CAL FIRE has more acronyms than RSO, but that's to be discussed later. Thank you for keeping our city safe. I know you kind of highlighted a lot of things that you guys are doing, a lot of resources that you're utilizing to keep us safe, so thank you very much for that. I would also like to thank all presenters tonight, our city attorney, city manager, and all the staff, yes, that you guys utilized to prepare those reports. Thank you for the public that came out to make comments and to just observe. I think that's it, Madam Clerk. Let's see. Yeah, let's adjourn this meeting at 7:37 p.m. Have a great week.